Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and with me, as always, is Ansgar Odinson.
Hey, everybody.
I like some of these. What is it? I've been reading the comments. I prefer my Outrage handcrafted, or artisan handcrafted, and then Dr. Misha Griffin is here. So I get my Outrage from Amazon Prime, free 2-day delivery.
We have the absolute best audience.
We do. We have us. That's not pandering. No, we will pander to our audience. Absolutely, we're not above that. You know, we could use, but in this case, it wasn't pandering. It was just really they come up with some good stuff. So there's a couple of just sort of housekeeping things I'd like to get out of the way. We are. I think it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, and then maybe an interesting month after that. We've spoken with Dr. Carrier, who we tried to book earlier, and it was a long thing. But we've got Dr. Carrier on. It looks like twice in January, and he's going to be discussing a very controversial topic. He believes he has a proof for why Jesus never actually existed. And
that'll be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an anti-theist. I don't think Jesus was the Son of God, but I believe he was real. I believe he existed, and that's universally accepted by historians. So he is a PhD in ancient history. We will see what he has to say. I'm hoping he's got something good. I keep telling him I'm going to sort of, read the book and catch up, but that's on my to-do list, so it's not going to get done. So looking forward to that. Also, tomorrow we have our Patreon hangout. All our patrons can hang out with us. They can talk to us, give us, talk to us about show ideas. We like to borrow show ideas from our patrons who, because we really can't come up with anything original. It's all you guys. Without you guys, there really is no show. It's not just the financial support. It's like without the ideas. Ansgar and I would be like, okay, we could do half an hour of thumb twiddling.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So no, join us. We'll chat. We'll hang out. It's for the patrons, any level of patrons. So if you're not yet a patron and you've been waiting for something, hopefully this may push you off into over the edge, as it were. The link for the patrons is in the description. Tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard. We put the link up on the Patreon page, and you'll get a notification, and it'll just be a hangout, and we all get to sit and chat for as long as it goes. So that's always fun.
And I'll bring the beers. Unfortunately, I don't think I can send them through the internet. So
we don't have that yet. Well, Amazon's working on that.
Yeah. Pretty soon, their drone deliveries,
So the other thing is we've got two very interesting shows coming up. I'm not going to discuss them too much right now. We've got the Black Dog, which I think will be happening probably next week. That's a long one. That's going to be a 2.5-hour show, and so we've been preparing for that for quite some time. The other one is basically what we're calling for now Project X, until we're ready to discuss it a bit more. But we've been working on that one for 3 months now. And we're all very excited to finally.
A lot of research. Oh my god. Yeah.
Oh Jesus, yes. that's been basically every waking hour that we've got free, and it's on the schedule for this month. We're hoping to get it done soon. We're of course behind on it, but we want to do it. We want to do it right, and we have to do it right. This is going to be a difficult one, so we're looking forward to it. I think we're going to get both Project X and the Black Dog out the door next weekend or the week after. So a lot of exciting stuff, and we really do appreciate everyone who comes into the live chat, hangs out with us, talks with us, and certainly our patrons. So thank you all very much. Because somebody on this show has ethics, I'll give you a hint. He's not on the left-hand side of your screen. We are exclusively basically Patreon supported. We don't, listen, the advertisers that want in on this Dollar Shave Club has just been knocking on my door, and we're just like,
because they looked at our faces and said, "Those are men who shave."
Yeah, that's exactly like, aren't you the kind of guys that I joke about them enough. They should be paying us for the amount of times that we mention them on but it's just that's not the kind of show we have right now, and I think we're very happy with where we are. So thank you all for your support. Thank you those of you who come to the Discord, those of you who give super chats. We are monetized. The super chats are a big help, and thank you also. One more thing before we finish. We have a producer. He gets a bad rap for having lost a fight with a nacho, but and the nacho just kicked his ass. I think he did. So there's not. Dave McGinnis wouldn't have a show without him. So he's just been absolutely vital to the running of this show. And I think as we sort of reflect Christmas and everybody's having a good time, except for misers like me who are trying to hate on everything. I just wanted to say, so I'd like to give a shout out to Dave McGinnis, and also to Kitty the Atheist. She is our community manager, and she likes to talk about, I don't really do much. I just sort of sit around and completely rebuild the Discord and get it so everybody's happy and working together and get the hangouts all working smoothly. But other than that, I don't do anything. So would really like to, on behalf of, I think Ansgar and myself, and even the fans, I would like to thank those two members who really they're not on the screen, but they are critical to our success. So Thank you to both of them. Yeah. So without further ado, I'd like to start on this manufactured outrage, which is a really interesting topic. I wanted to start with actually something sort of, I think what we're talking about, which is outrage porn. People who sit there and they get, they consume this outrage and get
really
demonetized. and they get demonetized by it. Yeah.
Well, no, you just said
Um,
porn, so and
oh, I did just.
demonetized.
Oh, that's right. Oh my God, I did just say porn. Well, what was it that you had said? You had said. Oh yeah, when something was retarded, and it was literally you weren't
Oh yeah,
talking
I
about.
was on Twitter and I literally explained the scientific definition, like as far as chemicals retarding chemical
Yeah,
reactions. I
yeah.
was talking about fire retardant, and I got suspended for a month. Fortunately, after
That'll
manual
learn you.
review, it was returned. But yeah,
No, a month suspension for talking about fire retardant.
yes,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it would be nice if we didn't on here on In Time also get. This is another reason we rely on our patrons, because we get demonetized for half our shows.
Right.
Half the stuff we do, YouTube's like, wrong.
So
All right.
So yeah, this quote, you shared it with me at the beginning, and
Yep.
before we started. It's an amazing quote. So please.
Well, this was it was Tim Creeder of the New York Times. He wrote in an article, and he was talking about this. And let me see if I can clear up that part of the screen there. He wrote, "It sometimes seems to me as if most of the news consists of outrage porn, selected specifically to pander to our impulses, to judge and punish, and to get us all riled up with righteous indignation." And then he went on to say, and then I just wanted to, I'm not saying that all outrage is inherently unhealthy or irrational. Uh, I'm not saying that we should all just calm down, that all is good. All is not good. Outrage is healthy to the extent that it causes us to act against injustice. And then let's see, I want to try to not go over the whole article. But he noted that for outrage porn, it spares us the important pain of empathy and the harder, messier work of understanding. And it does that by using sort of the gross generalizations and
Beautifully written.
mischaracterize. Well, I'm sorry, what?
Beautifully written.
Yes,
By the way.
yes. So that was the first, he coined the term outrage porn, and obviously back then, that was 2009. There was some understanding of this as a problem, but it's becoming really quite serious. So I was wondering, Ansgar, if you had any examples of that or what you had been thinking.
Yeah, actually, in preparation for the show, I actually separated manufactured outrage into 3 separate categories, right? And I separated them out this way, but you'll notice that as I talk about the tactics that they use in the examples, that you'll notice similar tactics or patterns of tactics that are used. And sometimes even the usage of manufactured outrage to manufacture more outrage to keep the cycle going. It's really interesting. So the first one, and this is probably the least like sinister but the most cynical, is we're going to talk about advertising. Now, manufactured outrage in advertising, this is something that I've dealt with personally. And what I mean is I was in advertising for a number of years. I was the guy that designed static image advertising, any kind of like, poster, flyer, things like that. I was head of a small art team that did what's called desktop publishing. But I would have to sit in on these meetings where they would literally look at all the current issues being debated in the public sphere. And this was before the time that social media was the way it is now. And they would talk about what issue can we basically piggyback off of that will generate just enough outrage to get to like boost our public profile, right? Everyone's talking about us. An example recently of this, for instance, is Gillette. They did their
Yes.
transgender thing. Now, I'm not saying that the ad said anything horrible. You know what I mean? Or the one that they did with the Gillette ad where they had, they characterized men as being, toxic and shit like that. Again, most of the messaging isn't necessarily shit I disagree with. The problem is I know where it comes from. It's incredibly cynical. They know that a certain population And it's very calculated. They've done focus groups. They know what percentage of the population is going to go, God damn it, look at what they're doing. They're so bad. And what they're going to do after that is they're going to cherry pick examples of people being genuinely evil. You know what I mean? Like, oh, look how horrible these people are for what they've said. And, yes, transgenderism is a mental illness. And they'll say something like that on Twitter. And what they'll do later is they'll grab screen grabs of these tweets or these comments or whatever and say, look at this huge swath of people that have said all of these horrible things, even though they're really just grabbing, a few cherry picked examples, which then creates a counter outrage. You know what I mean? People outraged about the outrage that really isn't there. It's really manipulative. So now what they've done is they've boosted their public profile by latching on to a movement or an issue. Then they've generated just enough outrage against that movement or issue to boost their public profile. Then they've used cherry-picked examples to create outrage against that outrage to get people who are like, well, now I'm going to buy Gillette just to piss off the trolls, And this is a very common thing that we see. Very common. In fact, we've even seen it in recent movies. As an example, the Star Wars movies, right? People will say, "Oh, I don't like Star Wars," right? And so the creators will come out, well, it's all these toxic incel trolls that don't like the new Star Wars, and that's why ticket sales aren't as high as we expected. And look, here's somebody who it's clear they just don't like women in Star Wars, and then the outrage cycle continues, and it's all over advertising. Like I said, not sinister, but certainly cynical. Very, very cynical. So that was the first example. I'm sure you can think of probably 40 or 50 examples off the top of your head of things that you've seen that have made you feel that way.
The only recent, and then this is so The Witcher, which I was a huge fan of the game.
Right.
And if I recall now, so now they're doing a Witcher TV series, and this is going to be on it's Amazon, I think. It's Amazon or Netflix. I think it's Amazon. And there was a tremendous outcry against the lack of diversity in the cast. Now, it is true. There is a lack of diversity in the cast. That's absolutely true. So you can get this huge outrage against the, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to be trying to be as inclusive as possible? And I think there's an argument to be made for trying to be more inclusive than we are. I'm not necessarily advocating affirmative action, but I agree you should try to be more inclusive. The problem is The Witcher is set essentially in medieval Poland.
Yes. A fantasy version of medieval Poland. It is all
medieval
Polish
Poland.
Yeah.
You're going to have a problem getting diversity in medieval Poland. It's not doable. Now, you could sit there and say, and then this gets into some other topics that we've covered before, but you could sit there and say, well, then maybe the material isn't worth it if there's no diversity. Well, I don't think that's true. I mean, we can't just tear up the material and we can't rewrite the material. It just is what it is.
And I've got a counter for that. Like,
yeah.
First of all, to say that it's not diverse, right? To say that that isn't diverse is to secede to the idea that white people are a homogenous collective, right? In fact, Poland is its own unique, interesting culture. And when was the last time that you have seen Polish culture and folklore brought to the big screen, let's say?
I think that's I think that, and those are points that are ignored when people, and what I think of when I see people, especially medium level bloggers, who say I need to have an issue that's going to elevate me to the next level, where I'm going to get lots of people.
Right.
I say, The Witcher's coming out and there's no diversity in it, and they don't really scratch under the surface to understand why that is. Again, legit claim, but they don't try to understand it any deeper. So then they sit there and say, we should be boycotting it, we should be doing, and then people who don't necessarily have time to do a deep dive and understand the issue glom onto that, and they say, oh, and then now you have the manufactured outrage, and the person who benefits from it is the person who's doing the manufacturing. And usually, I mean, they're getting ad revenues and increased views and so on and so forth. So that's the example that I was, because you had brought up Star Wars. I think the Witcher was a great example.
Well, it's interesting because if The Witcher is not diverse, then by the same token, Black Panther was not diverse. But
that's a really good point.
But that lack of diversity was necessary. You're talking about, again, a superhero based in African folklore and history. It's kind of honestly King Arthur, but in Africa, kind of, sort of. But yeah,
that's I like that. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so people take that and they can, and there was outrage about Black Panther too from the other side. I think most people didn't take it seriously, which I'm happy to hear. But again, this outrage culture where something, and I don't know. I tend to think I'm against the child beauty pageants. I'm really against it.
Yeah, me too.
But I do think there's an outrage culture against that too, where people oftentimes end up blaming the kids who are in it. I've seen that because they get so outraged, they're not thinking rationally anymore. Like, let's blame the kids. Let's blame and it's sort of like, no. And I mean, I think something needs to be done, but I think what needs to be done is to try to suck the oxygen out of the room for those kinds of things and get people to stop watching them. I think there's ways to do that, but to attack everybody. Now, don't get me wrong. The mom that was feeding her kid, what was it? I forget. She called it go-go, energy stuff. It was pixie sticks. She was just cutting off and her child was downing 30 pixie sticks to get enough energy to get through the show. I mean, that wasn't Honey Boo Boo. Oh, okay. No, that wasn't Honey Boo Boo. Although that had its own like, oh my God, but yeah, no. So I do think that's outrageous.
Yes.
But I think there are ways to respond that are moderated and can have much more efficacy than. I will give one more example. It's not on advertising, but if you don't mind, now this is one I always get into, because this one actually, the response outraged me. And I give this when I'm talking about economics and when I'm talking about a couple of different things, I give this example, but it works very well here. Why I'm for child labor and the child sweatshops in China, which I support. And I think people sit there and say, oh my God, how could you? Well, it's because of the alternative. China cannot feed its citizens right now. It doesn't have enough money to feed its citizens. A number of the citizens are starving. Now, there was a Dateline, they did a thing on these machine gun turrets outside the sweatshops to keep the children in, and the children would get injured but couldn't get medical attention. They couldn't go to the bathroom. They couldn't do all these other things. Most of that's reasonably close to true. There are these machine gun turrets, but they're to keep people out. The kids don't seek medical attention if they get injured because they don't want to lose that job as much as it's slave labor. They don't want to lose it because for every child that gets in to work those sweatshops, there's 50 outside trying to get in. They don't go to the bathroom, not because they're not permitted, but because if they do go, they'll get fired and somebody else will take their place. The problem is an economic problem. It's not that these things exist. It's that the government isn't regulating, and there's no way to regulate it economically in this. You want to solve sweatshops. It's real simple. Free trade between the US and China. What that does is we start buying their goods. All of a sudden, more sweatshops open up because they need to produce more. As more open up, the labor gets sucked into those. All of a sudden, there isn't quite enough labor for them anymore. So now, instead of people competing for jobs are competing for the people. This rises the level of conditions at the sweatshops, and they start to say, well, yeah, that place only gives you a 3-minute break, but we give you a 5-minute break. And it keeps getting up higher and higher and higher until eventually now everybody's employed and everybody starts making real money, and the level of wages is going up as they compete because the demand for that labor is going up. Why? Because we're buying those cheap goods. Now, that's all free trade. What happens to us? Our economy starts to go down in some cases. People start to lose their jobs because nobody here can compete with that labor. And that happens until you find an equilibrium. My point is this. There was a Christian woman who had seen all about these sweatshops. And she was just like, these sweatshops are disgusting, and the way they treat these kids is criminal. That's absolutely true.
Absolutely
That's all
true.
true. It's horrific what happens there. But if you were to actually go and talk to the kids, they would be thankful for doing it. They shouldn't be. I wish they weren't, but that's the condition, because it's that or starve to death. That's what it takes. And they're going in there willingly because they go home at night and then they come back the next day. There's a reason they come back the next day. The machine gun turrets aren't keeping, they go home at night and they can come, and they do come back. There's a reason. They prefer that to dying. And I probably would too. So what this woman did was she campaigned to have one of these sweatshops that I think was working for Nike shut down. And she worked her ass off, and she had gotten church groups, and she had gotten everybody rallied around, what is this doing to the children? Think of the children and think of the, but nobody was sitting there saying, yeah, but what are these children going to do once it gets shut down? Nobody cared about that at all. And she succeeded in getting it shut down. But she didn't create any new jobs. She didn't create a new place for these kids to go. Right. So a number of them probably ended up starving to death because there's no other alternative.
I mean, I'll get into some other my other categories, but before I do that, that kind of reminds me of there are places, I believe in South America, where what they did to end the poaching of endangered species was they actually set up businesses that were that took wealthy tourists on a tour to view these endangered species and hired the former poachers as tour guides. So now we're going to give you a financial incentive to protect the animals instead of a financial incentive to kill them.
Okay, so there's not much logic in that. There will always be more Chinese than jobs. Oh yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I thought I was going to argue a different point. No, I don't think that's true. I think if we have complete open trade with China, no, absolutely no. The price of products in the U.S. will fall dramatically, and the number of employed in China will go up until there's a state of equilibrium. But the reality is there's no country here that can't have full 100% employment if it's done right. It's just hard to do right, and nobody wants to do it because everybody's arguing over things that don't really matter. But one of the things I told people, and I sent in a letter to the, I forget, I think it was CNN that was covering this. And I was saying, they're going, if she really cares about these kids, she's going to argue for free trade, which may mean her husband gets less money at his work. It may mean that, the U.S. economy goes down, but she's going to start saving these children's lives. Saving lives is never easy. If it were easy, everybody would do it. And it's not as easy as closing down the sweatshop, which is an obvious, tremendous harm. But again, they're going there willingly because it's better than the alternative. That's why as I sit there, it's controversial. I say, yes, I support sweatshops. Why? Because it's better than the alternative.
Yeah, well, the poachers were poaching because they had no other way to live, not because they're evil people who want to see animals suffer. you know? So yeah.
Well, I think there's a few exceptions to that, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but by and large, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, so that's my long example. Yeah.
So this was actually going to be my third example, but so you've already kind of gone into this. Is drum beating.
I took a step forward. You know what's going to happen now too, which is somebody on Twitter is going to take I support sweatshops, and I'm going to get that memed all over the living daylights out. I'm going to get trolled like there's no tomorrow.
On a mug.
You're going to put that on? Oh, great! I support sweatshops. Yeah.
Just Nick's face with "I support sweatshops."
I support sweatshops.
And on the other side of the mug, just a dejected-looking Chinese kid.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thanks. Well, wait. What's it going to say on the mug?
Oh, that Nick supports sweatshops. Yeah.
Oh, I almost got you. Okay.
Almost.
Almost. You came close. All right. Yeah.
All right. So the third category, but I'm jumping ahead because we've already kind of given a couple examples of this, is drum beating. Now, drum beating is when basically somebody like that Christian lady decides that everyone needs to be outraged about something. I'm going to tell you why you should be outraged, and that if you're not outraged, you're a bad person. Um, Now sometimes, like in the case of this woman, what she's saying was absolutely true. You know what I mean? It was ignoring a second half of the story, the harsh realities. But other times, this comes with, mischaracterizations, lies, even outright fabrication of a narrative. And this can happen for several reasons. One, like us, it can be because somebody is, kind of ignorant, which this woman obviously was. She was closing her eyes to, harsh realities. It can happen because somebody has a cause they want to support, and, hang the consequences, hang the, we don't need honesty, what we need are results. It can happen because somebody's trying to boost their profile, like you were talking about with these bloggers. If I generate this outrage, then I'll get the clicks. um one of the one of the more famous two people, or two organizations, one organization, one person, really come to mind with this kind of outrage manufacturing. One is Breitbart. Breitbart is
Oh, Jesus.
just fantastic at this. Here's what you should
Yes,
be
sir.
outraged about, and this is why, and here are all the lies we're going to create to fabricate the narrative of why you should be outraged. Now, on the other side of the political spectrum, anyone who's been involved in gaming has heard of Anita Sarkeesian. She's mostly irrelevant now, but she is absolutely famous for this. Let me tell you why you should be outraged about something, and it's usually video games or something in the media. Um, one of my favorite recent examples is are you aware of the show The Mandalorian?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I haven't watched it, but I do know what it is. Yes.
Okay. So she watches the first episode and writes a 20 tweet long tirade about how there were no speaking female parts in The Mandalorian, and how this is, normalizing basically, you know toxic white male whatever, I don't know. But the funny thing is in that very first episode that she claims to have watched, one of the most important Mandalorians in the entire show, like the most important Mandalorian, is a woman who speaks. She's the
Ugh.
leader of their clan. The fact of the main character comes into her smithery where she's forging, and sits and waits to be addressed by her. Doesn't say a word. You can see already the sign of, the reverence and respect he gives this woman. Now, when people called her out on this, do you know what she did? She releases another
Uh,
tweet saying, "Look, I got nearly 3,000 replies to this tweet. It just shows that people are uncomfortable with that a woman has an opinion."
oh, Jesus. So that's the objection, is that a woman has an opinion. No, no, that's actually, I think, and I can think of a few other really big, like national level examples, of just mass hysteria kind of thing. But that's probably the single best example of the manufactured outrage, and then just that's a brilliant deflection of it. That's just
Yeah.
great.
And she doesn't
Oh, and
show
you,
the replies. She literally just bought, the screenshots that she got 3,000 replies to this, and it was all calling her out on her lie. That's it. Just saying you either didn't watch the show or you're lying. And now she's, "Oh, no, you just don't like women with opinions." What are you talking about? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Well, the two political ones come to mind.
Hmm.
Pizzagate.
Ooh,
Uh,
yes.
yeah. So the Pizzagate story was that the Clintons were running a pedophile ring outside of a pizzeria in New York.
Hmm.
People bought this, and to the
There are people
extent,
who still buy into it.
yes, there are people who still buy into it, very much so. And I've still gotten that. They're like, "Well, you know about what happened with the at that pizza parlor, right?" I was like, "That was a complete fucking set of," and the idea that somebody couldn't just like, listen, I understand that we live in the most polarized times since the Civil War. I get that, but if somebody told me that Trump, who I loathe, was running a a pedophile ring outside of a pizza parlor. I wouldn't believe it. I'm sorry, I wouldn't
No.
believe it. And the number of people who just bought into this because it was the Clintons, down to the point where somebody walked into that pizza parlor with a gun and demanded to see the back room so he could, videotape and show and prove that all this was true. And I forget what else. I mean, the pizza place had to be closed down because it was getting death threats, and everybody and people were taking this really quite seriously. And then when somebody walks in with a gun and demands a tour of the place, uh, ooh. So there was that one, and then the other one that's just an interesting one and every now and then I start with just an absolute fact, but I can't start with this fact because I get blocked anytime I start with this because people think I'm not an honest interlocker, which is Hillary Clinton didn't delete any emails. I don't know if you know, she didn't delete any emails. She didn't delete any of them.
Okay.
What happened was, as part of the course of the actual, and this is what Comey testified to. Everyone and people, I'm sitting there going, oh, people get really outraged about all the deleted emails. She didn't delete any. And it sounds, it's going to sound like equivocation. This is really quite important. What she did was, as part of a normal purge, her email server was managed by a third party, and she called them up and said, listen, could you guys just delete any emails that aren't needed and delete a whole bunch from this period of time? They said, sure, no problem. It's part of and it was part of the routine maintenance. This wasn't an extra request. Now, first of all, even James Comey at this point had said she had no way of knowing the subpoena was coming, and she didn't have the subpoena yet.
Mm-hmm.
This was handed to a technician. The technician said, hey, no problem, and he forgot to do it. He did not delete the emails. Then the subpoena comes in, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks later, and he has what is later described in Congress as an, quote, oh shit moment, where he realizes he should have done it and didn't. Now, at this point, he had actually reported to his bosses that he did it, which was a lie. His bosses reported back to her that they were deleted. Lie. They weren't lying. They believed it. She thought they were gone. She had no idea. And again, she didn't technically do the deletion. What ended up happening was the technician realized he should have done it, and at this point did something really stupid, which was he went ahead and deleted them now at this point. Well, now they're under subpoena. It doesn't matter that he should have deleted them, when back before the subpoena.
He was trying to cover his ass.
He was trying to cover his ass, and he deleted them at this point. Now, the first thing Comey does is he says it looks a little bit like maybe somebody tried to communicate with him and say, hey, go. But the truth is, everybody thought they were deleted, and he had the email chains on both sides of the conversation. Hillary thought they were gone already. Hillary deleted them ahead of the subpoena. He was able to recover almost all of them because every email has two sides to the conversation. He got the other sides of all of them. And in no case was there anything there incriminating. So she'd have no reason to do anything illegal. And he gave that guy, this was a tough choice. This was a tough call on his end, but he gave that guy immunity, blanket immunity, 100% to testify because he wanted to know, did Hillary reach out to you and say, listen, go do this? Was there any shenanigans going on? And the answer was no, he just screwed it up. But that people sit there and say, well, if there was nothing wrong going on, why'd they give him immunity? Because he broke the law, but they wanted to find out if Hillary did too. So they gave him immunity against his own actions. But nobody cares. So did Hillary delete emails? She didn't delete a single one. And the ones that were deleted illegally was done by a technician. She thought they were already gone. But if I start a conversation, oh, Hillary didn't delete any emails, the number of people who just hang up on that conversation, I'm sitting there going, you don't even bother. And I get that. But the outrage over it, and Trump still goes, where are the emails, Hillary? Where are the emails? And, they talk about how Comey.
Big part of that one. Big part of that one.
That's what got me thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, and he still hits that. Lock her up. For what? For what? They were deleted after the subpoena, not by her, and she thought they were already gone.
Now, the last category I want to cover, which is really interesting, and I'm going to bring up The Mandalorian again, interestingly enough, is outrage fabrication.
You totally would.
Outrage fabrication. This is when somebody claims that that a group, X group, is outraged about this, right? When that outrage doesn't exist.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And usually, this is somebody trying to again, they know this. What happens is when you create a false narrative like that, right? What do people do? What are you driven? What are you driven to do? Let's say I wrote an article claiming that everyone is outraged that Nick kicks puppies, right? And I wrote an article. Probably the first thing you're going to do is click that article and go write in the comments, "I'm Nick. I kick puppies," and nobody cares, right? That's what you're going to do. No, I'm kidding. But you're going to click it. Well,
Yeah, yeah, yep, yep.
one of the examples that I can bring up recently, and let me say, this isn't just bloggers that do this. I've seen this on the nightly news because it's going to get views. I've seen this on radio shows. It gets call-ins, it gets viewers, it gets hate call-ins. Let's face it, we love to hate. We will hate click. It's just what we will do. And one of the more recent, again, it happened with The Mandalorian. And this guy wrote an entire article, basically claiming that fans of Star Wars were outraged that a strong female character had been added into The Mandalorian. Now, this is a character played by, I forget her name right at the moment. I had it written down, but it's not in front of me. But she's an MMA fighter. She's amazing. And everybody loved the character. In fact, people were upset that she's only the episode focused around her, but like she's not going to be she wasn't in the next episode. They're like, oh, we want her as part of the crew and stuff, but she's going to be back in other episodes. But pretty much everyone loved this character. She's pretty universally beloved. Well, what the guy did was he took a screenshot of a tweet from a parody account and used that as his evidence. I mean, an obvious parody account. Like, if you know the account, you can go see their timeline. It is obvious. So it's not like he didn't know. The funny thing is when he got called out on it, he was quoted as to saying, "It got your clicks."
Yeah, we have a problem. We're gonna have to do a show on should you have to be credentialed to be a member of the media in the United States?
We've been talking about doing that show for a while.
We have, and I am actually for it. And it sounds terrible. It sounds like but the reality is, when they first started talking about lawyers having to be credentialed, everybody was outraged. Like, no, no, no. I do want to bring and I say this with the utmost. Oh, hold on. There's somebody in the chat, and I'm not going to say who, but there's somebody in the chat who has viciously attacked this show and has said that we are trying to manufacture outrage by discussing this topic. And I don't want anyone to retaliate against him. We're better than that. We're better than that. But his name is Tony Designs. And that may not have been him, but I'm going to say it was him. And I just think that everyone should let him know how we feel about him doing that, because that's a terrible thing to do to two struggling artists who are just trying to get a quality product on YouTube.
And you know what I heard? He just doesn't like it when men with beards have opinions.
That's what I heard. He's an anti-beardite.
He is.
We'll have a show on that anyway. All right, but so what were you saying before we just threw? This is what I like. I like the idea. We used to just throw Tony under the bus, but now we throw him under the bus, back it over, do it again. So it's just it's marvelous.
So yeah, he straight up admitted that I got your clicks. I don't care if it was real or not. And the thing is you can see this. Twitter and Facebook are notorious for this. In fact, you can have an article, and it can be a very amazing, well-written article with nuanced points and things like that. But then whoever the publisher is will click on, will slap onto it this horrible it's an article, it's a headline that's there only to generate outrage and to generate hate clicks. You know what I mean? And there have been a few bloggers who have been really upset that, every time they write this nice, well-reasoned, interesting, little, article or whatever, that somebody slaps on this headline. We all know how few people read past that headline, and all they're getting is these hate clicks, you know. And so that's not necessarily the fault of that particular blogger, but
Yep.
yeah, the I've seen it done on the nightly news. I've seen it done by bloggers. YouTubers love this. These people are, you know, outraged about this when, you know, they aren't. And so, and the this brings us kind of full circle to the quote that we started with, right? All of this, every last bit of it, every single tactic we're discussing here comes back to the human desire to be outraged, to want to punish a
Yep.
group or an individual for an indiscretion, and to be willing to look for that indiscretion, and be willing to castigate before doing any research. And it kind of goes back to the show that we did about, you know, bad journalism and bloggers, about, man, people, do your research before getting, you know, before falling for this crap.
That gets me to two interesting points, although I'm looking for
Hmm.
my red pen and I can't find it. There's never a red pen around when you need one. I think that's an interesting one. I can think of two examples that are like, and the first one is, the best one. First of all, there are a number of reasons why people do this. I think the reality is that everybody is going to want to do whatever it takes to get attention, to draw eyes, and you
Yeah.
can do that any number of ways. One of the interesting ones here in Boston, we had the tall ships, the old-fashioned ships that came from I think 50 different countries had the tall ships, and there was a rumor going around that the Russian tall ships couldn't afford to be here, and they couldn't actually afford food, and they couldn't afford all this. And so I was there watching the ships, and there was people donating cash, and it was all over the news. It made this huge thing, and the news ratings skyrocketed as everybody was talking about and we were here helping the Russians out, and it was just this very big thing. And somebody had come up to me and said, could you? And I had been speaking to them in Russian, because anytime I find someone who speaks Russian, I just chat with them. And I had been talking to them, and I had asked them about the money situation, and they said, "Oh no, there's no money problem." I was like, "What do you mean there's no money problem?" He says, "There's no money problem." One of the officers here had sort of mentioned it casually, and the news just ran with it. And he really meant he was having a money problem, but they took
Mm.
it as all the Russians are having a money problem, and we all get to come to their rescue. And now people are throwing money at us. And literally, as he said that, this woman comes up, hands me $5, and says, "You speak Russian. Could you tell them that this is from the whatever her family name was?" And I'm just like, I don't know what to do. It's just like, oh my God. But that's not manufactured outrage, but that is the an example of how the news media will run with a story that's not necessarily accurate. There's almost no way to verify it. I mean, I verified it. I found out it was fake by accident, but I think that's an example of hold on.
I
That's an example of how these things can run away from people. Yeah, what were we gonna say?
Well, there's another great example where you can have both advertisers or businesses who work hand in hand with the news. You know, one hand washes the other, kind of thing, where the journalists and the corporation work together to use this outrage. Because, you know, if we use this outrage, it'll be both good to sell our product and good to drive, clicks or views your direction. One of the examples of this was one of the new Battlefield games. Now, Battlefield is a franchise that has always, for years, prided itself on being a gritty, realistic portrayal of different wars, right? As historically accurate as possible. The weapons, the scenery, the stories, all of it as
Yep.
historically accurate as possible as you can get for a game. Well, a trailer launches for Battlefield 5, takes place in World War II, and there's wacky things going on. Like there's a British officer with a katana on his back, and there's a female what looks like an officer on the battlefield, but that's not the strange part. The strange part is she's an amputee with a fake arm, and she's holding a cricket bat over her head with both hands and beating a man to death as though the arm that is, so basically the arm's acting like a bionic arm, right? And people are going, what the hell is going on here? Well, both the people that make the game and the journalists, the gaming news outlets work together to craft the narrative that people just don't like women in video games. And it's like, no. Had this been like some female resistance fighter, she could even have been an amputee and stabbed someone to death. What you're talking about, first of all, supposed to be a realistic portrayal of World War II. First of all, she's a British officer, which didn't happen at that time period, not on the front lines. Now, resistance fighter in like France or Norway or something like that, abso-fucking-lutely. And I'm sorry, but prosthetic arms just didn't work that way. They don't. You can't use them like a regular arm to beat someone to death. I mean, it's just it doesn't happen. Now maybe if she was an amputee from like just here, and she had a knife attached to the end of it, and she was, I mean, sure, but yeah, it was the. So what ended up happening was both EA, the company, and the journalist worked hand in hand to craft this narrative to both drive clicks toward toward their outlets and boost the public perception of the game.
I'm trying to remember. There was another recent example of them sort of colluding. I hate to use that word, but that's the best word. Two organizations colluding to do that. A news organization and a I'm going to try to remember that. But before we do, I wanted to. There's an update on the anti-beard situation.
Oh no.
Yeah, well, now
bastard.
Yeah. He's now claiming that it's okay he's against beards because he's got one too.
Oh, well, that totally makes it okay.
Yeah, that makes it
self-loathing anti-beardists are the worst.
I know, Jesus.
Beard traitor.
God. It's yeah, we can all forgive him because he's got a beard too, so it's okay that he hates other people.
He's a
I don't know.
Beardist.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have a caveat in the future when we say we have the best audience. We have to make sure that a couple of people are precluded from that.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing that I think is interesting, and so what I think we're going to do is maybe see if we can cue this up. Well, this was sort of a last minute thing. We have a clip that I'd like to get queued up, and I'd like to talk about it a little bit before, because we're sick of not getting demonetized. I mean, we've had too many shows that have actually made yeah, that's a fair point. We'll see if we can do this clip or not. I'm not entirely sure. The clip is owned by Comedy Central, and it's I don't mind. I don't mind when Ansgar gets a copyright strike against him, but when I'm included in that copyright strike, I have a bit of a problem. So while our producers discuss whether or not we can use this clip, I will tell you what it's about. So Nancy Grace is, I think, almost the epitome of doing this. When you take a look at, so somebody had asked earlier about, well, gee, it's not outrage culture if there's or manufactured outrage if there's real outrage. Well, look, I forget what her name was. I just had it on that she was she was in Aruba and she went missing, and it wasn't Kaylee. Kaylee Anthony was the baby that she did this. So there was a woman was in Aruba, went missing, and for 18 days. Nancy Grace every day was, how can someone go to Aruba and have this happen? Why aren't the police investigating it properly? Now Nancy Grace is a former prosecutor, and you'd think as a prosecutor she would know better than to do this kind of thing, but she would have on all sorts of experts who would all agree with her and say that this is an outrage. Well, tourists do go missing. People go missing in countries all the time. she was important only because she was female and she was white. And the reality is, a lot of people go missing abroad and nobody gets really outraged about it. But in this particular case, she was able to manufacture this to the point where her ratings, originally on, I think she was on CNN and then she moved to Fox. Her ratings just started to skyrocket because everybody wanted to see what was going on with this woman who got kidnapped and ostensibly had been kidnapped. Did her boyfriend murder her? Nobody knows. And there was speculation just going wild. And she didn't care whether any of it was substantiated or not. She just wanted to get as much attention as possible. Now, she also did this with Casey Anthony. She was the woman who murdered her child. And all of a sudden, she's just seizing on this and she's covering the entire trial. Happened with O.J. Simpson, another great example of O.J. Simpson. Guilt or innocence is another interesting question, but O.J. Simpson, that was manufactured outrage. I mean, the reality is people do get murdered in this country all the time. And just because he's famous and just because of, there are implications to it, there are plenty of cases that have, oh yeah, Natalie Holloway, that was, I think that was it. There's always these cases that happen, but it's the ones, and I remember at one point, even not too long ago, you and I had talked about, are we going to cover the death of a former winner to American Idol? And I was sitting there going, well, you know what, it's culture, and a former American Idol singer died. And he said, yeah, but people die all the time. Why does this person get special attention just because of, like, you know what, that's a really good point. And all of a sudden the news goes off on it as this huge tragedy. There are a lot of tragedies. And I think, so you get this manufactured outrage, manufactured drama. So I think at this point, let me just see where we are on. It looks like, Ansgar, it seems to me like you are at this point against playing it. We could probably drop a link to it.
Yeah, I'm probably I think I'm against playing it. Thing is I would have to
I can drop a
download
link.
it.
It's not big.
I would have
All
to
right,
download it to do what we need to do, and even that
perfect.
is risky.
Yes, it is. So we have a clip. There's a clip I'd like to show our audience. Unfortunately, it is owned by Comedy Central, and we've done a few other clips. We did a clip for the FCC. We did Family Guy singing the FCC song, which was totally appropriate for that show. And we didn't get a strike against us, but we did get demonetized for that show.
Oh, we got claimed.
This one,
we didn't even get demonetized. We got claimed. In other words, everyone that watches that show gives Comedy Central money.
oh yes, yeah. And I honestly don't mind the claim. I just don't want a copyright strike. I'm not sure we'd get a copyright strike for it. And I think this is a well worth it. So Nancy Grace is the queen of manufactured outrage, and she's particularly good at it. Now, a couple years ago, 4 Duke lacrosse players were accused of raping a black woman. And what ended up happening, and she did show after show after show on it, and she buried them. No innocent until proven guilty. Everything was just an assumption of guilt. One of my favorite, and this clip that we're gonna drop in the live chat. One of the things that it goes to was something that I remember when this happened was she rarely brings on people who disagree with her. Most of the people she brings on just to hype up you're right, Nancy, this is terrible. You're right, Nancy. Why aren't the police doing more? I don't get it, Nancy. And she had brought on somebody who was actually an independent thinker. And he said, I'm looking at this evidence and I'm not going to say they're innocent, but there's reasonable doubt. You can't convict on this. And she flipped the fuck out and she goes, well, then why don't we all go back to Nazi Germany where, guilt or innocence is decided before the trial? This is a woman who's going around telling everybody they're guilty.
Right.
And all he did was say, I think there's reasonable doubt. That's all he said. And she just, and then it turned out they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The prosecutor had fabricated evidence in this case, in part because it blossomed so big, he felt he had to win it. If so much pressure had been put on, and there was racial questions about it. Okay, it's a black woman. Is she going to be treated the same as a white woman? So the prosecutor, when he had exculpatory evidence and he knew for a fact they were innocent, kept going, and there was no question he knew. No question he knew, but he didn't want to lose during an election year. I think he was a district attorney. His seat was up, and he went ahead with it anyway. Now he got he lost obviously his license to practice. I don't remember if he got jail time, but he got in. He was innocent. Now these kids had their lives destroyed. They were kicked out of the school, which was another thing used again. If they're innocent, why did the school kick them out? That was literally the argument she made, as if the school determines what guilt or innocence, or just does it based on, because the school knows for certain whether. Oh God! So I'm going to take this link. I'm going to drop it. In
I
the
dropped it as well. At least
oh, you
I
dropped it.
dropped the
Oh,
one that you
perfect.
put in the Twitter DM
That's
group.
it. That's the one.
Okay.
And what you'll see in that one was probably the best review of Nancy Grace in general. It's Jon Stewart on The Daily Show covering that particular story and how she covered it. And she that's manufactured outrage right there. She's the queen of it. I loathe her too.
I mean, the anti-vaxxer movement has been
Yes.
basically fueled by manufactured outrage. You know what I mean? Look, they're hurting your children. Please, please think of the children. They're coming after your kids. You know, be upset at big pharma because they're after your children. It was, I mean, manufactured outrage is the bread and butter of the anti-vaxxer movement. So sometimes, this faux outrage, this manufactured outrage, the drum beating, any one of these tactics can be used to do more damage than just, oh, we advertised a product cynically, or, oh, I was boosting my Twitter profile. No, sometimes it does real freaking damage.
It does. It ruins people's lives. And
Yeah.
I think you had said this before. You and I were having a conversation on tribalism.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think all of us like to think of ourselves above tribalism. None of us are.
None of us.
If we're conscious of it, we can mitigate it. We can do that, but that's about all. We can't stop it. And so, we had been talking about that, and it's amazing because, well, you had said, why don't you say about the us and the chimpanzees? I mean, we're just basically,
Oh
you had said,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
or apes.
if we put every problem that we have, every context, if we contextualize everything that's going on under the idea that we are just social apes, you know what I mean? If we just think about every problem from that perspective, it makes it a lot easier to solve anything. Like okay, the problem with manufactured outrage, let's just use Twitter, right? One of the problems is the way it's designed. It's very how should I put it? The very core of its design incentivizes manufactured
Yes,
outrage, right? So you're
yes.
never going to just get people to stop being tribal, to stop being, manufacturing outrage, to do all these things that play to the core principles of what we are as social apes, right? These things are inborn in our species. We have these propensities to do these things because they're playing off of certain survival instincts and certain social survival instincts for group that maximize group cohesion. So you're not going to do that, but what you can do is design legal systems, design social systems, design interface systems that disincentivize the worst parts of that behavior and incentivize the best parts of those behaviors. Because all of these things, both tribalism, the instinct to punish the injustice, all of these things have both good sides and bad sides. And the problem is that we aren't necessarily always designing systems that incentivize the good sides because they don't have the immediate payoff as
Yep.
incentivizing the bad sides. And
And we
that's
really are. We have reward-seeking behaviors. I mean, we like. That's why. That's one reason why we do like the righteous indignation. I think. I mean, and I had said this before. I have to believe it's enjoyable to be in the KKK because you assume you're better than a huge portion of the population, and hatred is cathartic. Hatred is fun. I wish it weren't, but it is, and that's what the KKK does, and it's a sense
any
of
conspiracy.
self-superiority.
Any
Yep.
conspiracy does that. You know the real truth and everybody else is
Yes,
blind to it.
that's why flat Earth and all that. Although flat Earthers are finally, I hope that there's the death knell on flat Earthers, but um,
Sadly,
Oh
it's
God.
growing.
Oh, it would, wouldn't it? All right. Well, I think unless there was something else you wanted to cover, I think that just about does it. I do want to remind people. I hope you guys will check out that link. That's um, for the Daily Show. That's Nancy Grace, and that's Manufactured Outrage right there. She's insane. She is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. What? Oh well, hold on a sec. I think one of those links was donkey porn. Yeah, if that was me, I just copied and pasted from Ansgar, so I got no idea where that donkey porn came from.
Oh, come
Ask
on.
Ansgar.
Everyone knows I'm more into kitty porn, so it's good.
uh, all right. Well, so thank you all for joining us. We do hope again to all our patrons who are currently our patrons until they see the show. To all our current patrons, tomorrow 1 p.m. Eastern Standard, we'll be dropping a link in the Patreon page for our hangout. If you are not yet a patron and would like to be, that we really very sincerely support our patrons and do a monthly hangout with all of them, and we hope you guys will join us. At any rate, thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.
All right, see you guys later.